Hello people, welcome to my channel. My name is Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, currently ranking and reviewing every single Frank Zappa album released after he passed in December of 1993. And we are currently on number 37, Dance Me This. A lot of things to say before we get into the actual music. First off, let's just acknowledge that this entire ranking my favorite albums thing is an artificial construct to give me an excuse to talk about every single Frank Zappa release. This is at number 37, but it just hurts me to rank this anywhere, to tell you the truth, because this is a really incredible album. It is 100% synclavier music, and I'm not, for the most part, a synclavier fan when it comes to Frank. Especially the early stuff like Jazz from Hell, the stuff on Frank Zappa Meets the Mother of Prevention. It is just too cold for me, too artificial, too seemingly random in the composition. I know it's not. I know Frank actually wrote and composed these things, but sometimes I have a feeling it's just a bunch of ideas that he had and decided to turn them into one song. You can argue with me all you want about that. I feel completely different about this album. This is a 6 pieces on this are phenomenal. Then there's 5 in the middle that cause this to kind of fall back to where it is here on this list at 37. And so I know that, like, I don't know. I just feel bad ranking it this low, this far back towards the end, because it is a phenomenal synclavier album, and there are some absolutely amazing pieces here. And conceptually, I think conceptually it is pretty brilliant at what Frank is trying to do here. But that doesn't mean I want to listen to it all the time. And so that's kind of why it falls here, because it's not something I listen to as much as everything above it. And there's a particular reason which I will talk about. The other thing I want to say is there's a lot of backstory to this. You can do a lot of research. This is one of those I had listened to, but I knew a little bit about, but I did find out more about this before doing this video, which sheds light on another release that I previously talked about, something I actually learned. So anyways, if you're familiar with Frank, you know that he had projects going on all the time. Like almost every album that he put out was at some point part of a 5 or 6 album box set that never got released. You know, going back to No Commercial Potential, which never got released back in the 60s. Then he had like Crush All Boxes in the early 80s. Leather, which never officially got released during his lifetime and then became 4 other albums. So apparently, I did know that he was working on this, like, I guess like a massive sort of, I don't know if it was an album or a stage something called Dio Fa. The song Dio Fa eventually ended up on Civilization Phase 3. And then I just recently learned that he was also working on either a musical or a opera, I think it was, called Uncle Sam, which explains the song the overture to Uncle Sam, which appeared on Zappa for President, which I did not know about. So anyways, apparently he was working on all these projects, and a couple of the pieces, or some of the music from those projects is what made it on here. And so this was kind of Frank's chance to kind of get these loose ends and release them officially. This was not released until after he passed, long after he passed, 2015, but it was the last thing he actually completed as an album before he passed away. This was designed to be for modern dance companies. That I do know. So Frank had intended for this to be, dance music, essentially. Dance Me This. It's in the title. And so there's that aspect, but there's also a conceptual sort of aspect in the middle, in that you have 11 songs on here. 6 of them, I think, are Frank's possibly all-time best synclavier work, even better than a lot of the stuff on Civilization Phase 3, which I've yet to review, which is sort of his magnum opus synclavier work. But there's 6 synclavier songs, fantastic. But then there's 5 songs which definitely feel more like background music to a soundtrack. Soundtrack, why does that sound weird? They're less sort of melodic. They're less like, you can, like, a lot of the other 6 songs feel like actual songs. You almost can, like, there's a melody and it feels like there's a structure, not like first chorus, but it feels like there could be. But the 5 songs in the middle are definitely more atmospheric soundtrack pieces, and they're all called Wolf Harbor 1, Wolf Harbor 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the United States, outside of Memphis, Tennessee, one of our states, there's a river, the Mississippi River, and I know that the Mississippi was like one of our biggest sort of like the Mississippi runs from the Gulf all the way up to up to Minnesota, and a lot of like ships and there's boat traffic on there. And there was a part of the Mississippi River which, because of the way the currents go, this water would flow into like this harbor area, and it just became stagnant and it became poisonous and it became polluted, it became toxic, and it was declared like officially dead in like the 60s and 70s. It was a major sort of EPA, like this is what we're doing to our environment. And so these middle five pieces, from what I've read, and it makes sense listening to them, are about Wolf Harbor and are pretty sort of much a musical sort of commentary on the pollution that we have created and destroyed this entire river environment. So from a conceptual standpoint, it works phenomenally. It sounds like that. Like it has a very uncomfortable, eerie, this is not what we should be doing type sound, but it's really long. Like this section is, I'm doing some quick math here. It's almost 30 minutes long, just short of 30 minutes long on a 48-minute CD. So it's more than half of the CD is this just sort of not stagnant, but kind of stagnant series of songs. And so as much as I love the first two songs and as much as I love the last four songs, those middle five, that middle 28 minutes of music are like, do I want to hear this now? So it kind of prevents me from listening to this more often than I should. But anyways, that's enough. I recommend it. Oh, it also has on it two other things. Apparently Frank's last ever played guitar solo is on this. When he was putting this together, apparently Dweezil brought his guitar rig into the studio. Frank picked it up, played guitar, dropped a short little guitar solo on the very first track, the title track, Dance Me This. And three of the songs feature Tuvan throat singers. Apparently they were in Los Angeles to do something. They visited Frank, he recorded them, there were three of them. Then he used their Tuvan throat singing on three of the tracks, and that elevates the Synclavier tracks just like immediately. Like that human element, especially a human element that sounds like Tuvan throat singers, which is just not like anything else. So amazing, so beautiful. Really makes those songs stand out and really gives the album a lot more sort of, I don't know, depth and warmth that the normal Synclavier stuff doesn't. Last thing, gosh, there's a lot to say about this. And I do think, obviously, two things happened over time. The Synclavier, probably as all technology does, got better. I mean, Frank could probably do more things with it. The sounds got warmer. You could add more sort of ambiance in it and more like sort of just feeling and more like different textures and flavors. And Frank obviously exploited that to a great degree on this album. And then Frank probably got better at playing with the Synclavier. You know, he got it out of his system, what he needed to do early. Now he was experimenting more, and he was able to create, better sounds and better songs and better experiences, if you ask me. So these are the songs on it. The first two songs, almost everything in this segues directly into each other, so it feels like kind of one piece. The first two songs, Dance Me This and Pachuco Gavotte, probably Gavotte, Gavotte, Pachuco. Great songs, kind of short, both like one's 2 minutes, one's like 3.5 minutes. The opening Dance Me This one features the Tuvan throat singers. It features the Zappa guitar solo, and it feels like an early 80s Doobie Brothers or late 70s Doobie Brothers, like the Michael McDonald, like the like the sort of You Belong to Me. It has that sort of like kind of cheesy synth sound in it. It's kind of warm and comfortable, and it's a great opening song. Unfortunately, it's only like 2 minutes long, but it's a great opener. This goes directly in to Pachuco Gavotte, and that has this dun 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 sort of like, it sounds like a guitar like riff. It sounds like a Let's Move to Cleveland solo spot from the '84 tour. It sounds like one of many solos on the guitar album. It just has that repetitive dun 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 vamp that Frank would solo over. There's no solo over this. It's a guitar. It's a Synclavier track, but that vamp makes it seem like Dance Me This is the song, And then Pachuco Gavat is the solo, even though it's all synclavier work. And that vamp provides sort of this steady bass on which the synclavier stuff can dance over. It's just phenomenal. It's a great opening punch. Unfortunately, or fortunately, you might like it, the next 5 tracks are the 28 plus or 28 or so minutes of Wolf Harbor. And they're all not the same, but they do kind of, after a while, kind of blend together. So the first track, Wolf Harbor 1, is 8 minutes of what is essentially establishing the environment. It's a lot of sounds, a lot of textures. It feels not pleasant. It feels kind of ugly. It feels like you can see, if you knew, even if you didn't know that this was about polluting the water, you get a sense that whatever's happening is not that good. It just feels uncomfortable. And then the second track, the drums and percussion sounds take over, and it has a very sort of early 60s, the Zappa playing, drum solos, a lot of the little short tracks on Uncle Meat where it's just drums. It kind of has that feel, but of course it's synclavier, created by the synclavier. This is almost 7 minutes of that. And again, it's almost like the pollution has been added to the water on the first track, and now it's activating, and it's like getting worse, and like, chemical reactions are happening, and bad stuff is happening, right? But then the third one hits, and this is like, now all of these chemical reactions are coming to life and like expressing themselves in like 2 people. It's affecting the environment. The third track, which is like 6 minutes long, there seems to be a lot more action happening. There seems to be movement. Still doesn't feel like a song. Still feels like, like a sound. I'm establishing an environment, a musical environment, and things are happening within that environment, not connected to each other. But there is a little more movement. Almost feels like the radiation from the harbor is now rising up, and monsters are about to attack, I-30 as it rolls over the harbor, as it rolls across the bridge and the Mississippi River. Mud Island is being taken over. So that's what the third part feels like. Then we go to the fourth part. They're back to the percussion, but now the percussion has this sort of falling apart energy, where instead of being like propulsive and uplifting, it's almost like, I'm like, I can't finish this, like, I'm going to do this little, but I can't finish the last 2, and it has this like decaying aspect to it. So again, thematically, it works perfectly. And then the very last part is very much sort of the death knell of the harbor. A lot of percussion. You even get a gong sounds at the end. It's more dramatic and more drawn out, but it feels like the ultimate death of the Mississippi River, the death of the harbor, the death of this area. So as a 28-minute 5-part sequence, it completely makes sense conceptually, and it's actually a pretty powerful piece if you are thinking about what it's about and listening to it. As something that's just listening to for enjoyment and something I want to put on all the time, those 5 songs don't engage me or excite me as much as the rest of this. So after that, we get Goat Polo, which again, you get the tube and throat singers back, and this has a very Black Page aspect to it. There is something very Black Pagey about it, but very like just that the early Black Page, not the dance version, but the Basio version or Black Page #1. It has that very kind of feel to it, a herky jerky, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense. That's good. The tube and throat singers, of course, add that depth of human sort of emotion, that human presence that the synclavier normally lacks. Then you get, I'm going to mispronounce this, Ryko Niki. So Rykoniki. This sounds like an early 80s instrumental. The Mars, Vi, Man, that group, the 81, 82, it has those kind of lines, something like maybe something that you would find on Drowning Witch, or I want to say Envelopes. That goes obviously back to the 60s, but their version of Envelopes or Maggio or something like that has that kind of feel to it. So that's awesome. Then that goes in. The next track is called Piano. And for almost the entire length of this, it's 7 minutes long. For about the first 4.5, 5 minutes, it's all piano sounds. It sounds like Ian Underwood playing the piano. It sounds like there's he's programmed 2 different sort of pianos kind of not necessarily competing with each other, but sort of complementing each other. And then it sort of gets more active and stuff, and other instruments come in towards the end. But it's just a beautiful piece, and it like really completely expands the palette of the synclavier. And it's like, man, if he had done stuff like this more often, I think some of the earlier stuff would have been more enjoyable. But this is just a beautiful piece of music. And like I'm trying to, as I'm doing this, I know at the end of this project I'm going to put together sort of my favorites of all the post releases. Pretty sure either Dance Me This or Piano are going on that, because these are really, really solid tracks. And then the entire thing closes out with Calculus. My cat just ran through the room. Calculus, again, has more Tuvan throat singers. And this one kind of sounds like it's kind of funky. It's got a funk element to it. And it almost sounds like an O'Hearn, Patrick O'Hearn, bass player, 77, 78, 76. Kind of sounds like him on bass. Kind of sounds like something he would play in one of his solos, like the Pound for Pound solos on Volume 4. It has that boom, just that, has that momentum sort of slow, fat bass sound that kind of propels it forward. And that's the way the album ends. And if I'm not mistaken, the last notes on this are like a crash, and then it actually just kind of fades out and ends. I mean, this is a really good album. 6 of these songs are just by far, I think, his best synclavier work. I think track for track, they might be better than the stuff on Civilization, though I think Civilization is altogether a more impressive album and project. These songs are strong, and really how you feel about this album will kind of matter how you respond to the Wolf Harbor part. But that's it. I realize I've talked 16 minutes for this album. That is crazy. But it's one of those that, like, when I got it, because it was synclavier music, I immediately, it's only been out for about 6 years, I had this sort of to it, but then it has grown on me so much over the years that, like I said with the soundtrack album, if I revisit this list in like a year, it might pass Civilization at some point. I might learn to love Wolf Harbor. Have not done that yet. But anyways, I recommend you check this out, because it's just, it's phenomenal synclavier work. I love it. If you have, let me know in the comments, all that kind of stuff. Algorithms, so subscribe. But thank you for watching. I did not know I had this much to say about this album, but man, this is just, there's a lot. Yeah. I can't even stop talking about this album. It really, I think I'm ripping it off by putting it at 37. But then I look at the list, I'm like, but what is it better than? Like, I don't know. All of this stuff is amazing. So I'm done. Bye. Sorry for talking for so long, guys. Be safe.